Mhm. Welcome everyone to Exile and Bookbill's Author on Tap reading series. I'm Javier Ramirez, and along with Kristen Gilbert, run this beautiful space at 410 South Michigan Avenue, Suite 210 in downtown Chicago. You guys are in for a treat today. This afternoon, well, I mean afternoon here, but 7 o'clock in Barcelona, Spain, where Javier Calvo and his amazing translator, Mara Faye Lethem, are coming to us from. Javier and Mara will be in conversation with Exile VIP Michael Zapata. A little bit about our guests. Javier Calvo lives between Barcelona, his hometown, and Brooklyn. He's the author of 2 collections of stories, 6 novels, and 2 nonfiction books, including an essay on literary translation. His fiction has been translated into French, English, Italian, and German. Mara Faye Lethem is an award-winning translator and author of A Person's Person, No Matter How Small, from Antibookclub 2020. She lives in Barcelona and Brooklyn and is currently translating When I Sing, Mountains Dance by Irene Solà. Michael Zapata is a founding editor of Make Literary magazine and the author of the novel The Lost Book of Adana Moreau, winner of the 2020 Chicago Review of Books Award for Fiction, finalist for the 2020 Heartland Booksellers Award in Fiction, and the best book of the year for NPR, the AV Club, and Book Page, among others. I personally loved it. It's an amazing book. We're going to host Michael in July, so we're excited about that. That's why he's a VIP. He's a recipient of an Illinois Arts Council Award for Fiction and the City of Chicago DCASE Individual Artist Program Award. He is on the core faculty of Story Studio Chicago and the MFA faculty of Northwestern University. As a public school educator, he taught literature and writing in high schools, servicing dropout students. He currently lives in Chicago with his family. So go to the link in the chat to order copies of Silver Skin and use the code Exile and Bookbill to get free shipping. Order many copies. It's holidays are coming right around the corner. We encourage everyone to keep their cameras on, but mute yourselves until the Q&A session of the event. I'm going to get out of the way now and hand it off to Michael Zapata. Thanks you guys for being here. It's going to be an amazing event. I can't wait to listen in, and we're going to let our patrons listen in as well. So take it away. Thanks.
Thank you everyone for joining us today, tonight, whatever country you might be in. I am told by the publisher I was lucky to have the only copy on hand. There's going to be lots of copies available very soon, within the next couple of days. But this is I wanted everyone to see just how gorgeous this book is itself, both inside and out. So just completely honored to be able to introduce and talk about this novel today. Silver Skin, for me, it's very tender, it's very fierce, and it's compulsive in the same way that going to your first punk show at 15 is compulsive, or making your very first piece of art is compulsive, or accidentally reading a forgotten poet at 2 a.m. after a shitty breakup is compulsive. It's a novel both with the ripe possibilities and also the dangers of another type of life in the face of adulthood, which is a clumsy, quote, clumsy parody of life, unquote, and quote, a prison of perception. But it does a lot more than that, so much more. Where does a total war against socially constructed reality lead us? Into what artistic or philosophical ends does it lead us? And what does our life look like after passing through what the protagonist Paul says is the other side? So Silver Skin follows Paul in adolescence in Barcelona with early onset schizophrenia and his obsessions with the cult science fiction writer Cooper Crow, and a young woman named Ronan who exists for him somewhere between a holy madness and, we discover as the book unfolds, fascism. So what follows is a complete excavation of art, violence, and both the frontiers and dead ends of Western culture. So for me, as I read this, it was really, truly something akin to gazing into a Caravaggio painting, who I think says similar things about Western culture. And of course, heartrendingly, those tenuous months during our adolescence, after which everything seems to transform. But even more, and I don't know how you did this, Javier, but even more, it's one of those great, great books that just absolutely fucks with the concept of literature itself. This is a reading way beyond a feeling as banal as empathy. This is way beyond that, and something more valuable to us. I had a profound experience reading this book. It made me reconsider so much of my own adolescence and trying to think about what it would mean one day to become a writer and the dangers of the ideologies of when you're young. So Javi, I mean, congratulations. This was just an enormous read. So I am going to briefly.
Was that a hardcover?
This is a hardcover.
Look at that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's absolutely.
I wasn't expecting that.
Well. I mean, I wish everyone could hold this. It's just absolutely gorgeous in and out. So we did ask Mara Lethem if she would share with us a reading. She's going to read part of the novel in which the protagonist Paul is describing. It's my understanding this is the part describing 3 photographs that he has of the cult science fiction writer Cooper Crow. So on to you, Mara.
I said before that I moved to Brooklyn with just one suitcase. I don't remember what was in it. There must have been clothes, obviously, which is actually quite ironic. A large part of the space in my personal Noah's Ark was taken up by clothes that would be too small for me and forgotten in a matter of months. But now I want to talk specifically about my 3 photographs of Cooper Crow, which also made the cut and came along to America with me. I got those 3 photographs between the ages of 11 and 12, and I had them on the wall in my bedroom in the apartment on Ronda de San Antonio until we left there. They were the only photographs I ever had up in my room. They filled the same emotional space as the posters of athletes and pop singers, or family studio portraits and children's drawings that you might find in the bedrooms of other young people, ones who are connected and attached to their social environment. The 3 photos formed a scalene triangle above the mom desk where I kept my laptop. Actually, I've already described the one occupying the lower angle a few chapters earlier. It was the photo from the back cover of the pocket edition of Goodbye to All Goodbyes that I'd bought in the community bookstore. When I got back to Barcelona, I'd photocopied it, blown it up 150%, and put it in a cheap frame with a small white cardboard mat. It is still one of the most iconic photographs of Cooper Crow. I learned the story behind it from an autobiographical text that Crow included in his book, London Mannerisms. It was taken in Hampstead Heath in September 1968, so Crow was 29, during the first Camden Free Festival, held on an outdoor stage on Parliament Hill Fields. The photo, however, doesn't look like it was taken on the cleared, windy slopes of Parliament Hill, but rather on the wooded edges of the west or northwest side of the park, in the Vale of Health, or even on Spaniards Road. Ancient knotted oaks, twisted tentacular branches, sky tinted by the violet filter of a Hammer Films vampire movie. In the foreground, Crow wears an early version of his classic hippie-era cowboy outfit. Dark, wide-brimmed hat with some sort of handkerchief tied around the band, black hair down to his shoulders, long, curly beard, black leather coat so long it only reveals the tips of his cowboy boots, and a long, long scarf, Doctor Who style, that seems to be the same one he's wearing in the other photos of the period. The photo shows him standing beside a fallen tree, his hands sunk into his pockets, his head tilted down, and his eyes looking mischievously at the camera. Behind his back is a solid line of twisted old oaks. My first impression when I saw the photo in the community bookstore was that it had been taken in a cemetery, in Highgate, for example, or one of those other neo-Gothic cemeteries of the Victorian period. Your eyes scanned for stone angels amid the branches. But if you look closely, there wasn't actually anything that designated a cemetery. The second photo formed the right angle of the scalene triangle and was bigger. It was the size of a page from the music magazine Mojo, because I took it from an old Mojo magazine where it filled a whole page. I had put it behind a piece of plexiglass held together by metal clips on each of the four sides. It was the worst of the three frames because depending on your angle when you looked at the photo, all you could see was the light bulb reflecting on the plexi in your own face. I found that Mojo in a box of old music magazines at a table at the San Antonio market. My intuition told me to page through it when I saw the name of the band Hawkwind on the cover. The photograph had the satin texture of magazine paper and a caption in the lower right corner. Cult sci-fi author Cooper Crowe, here portrayed with occasional bandmate Robert Calvert, was a major lyrical influence on Hawkwind. He wrote 24 songs for the band and contributed vocals to Warriors and The Wizard Blew His Horn. In the photograph, Calvert is talking, and Crowe's listening to him, or at least pretending to listen to him without looking directly at him. Calvert is wearing a tight wife beater and the aviator glasses he always wore. Legend attributes his bipolar disorder to his failure to achieve his childhood dream of becoming a pilot. Crowe's head is slightly bowed and he's smiling. It's possible he's nodding. Maybe the way people smile and nod when they're just going along with somebody else. It's impossible to tell from his face because Crowe basically has the same expression in every photograph, an astute smirk, as if he's watching a brown bear approach you from behind as you take his picture. In the second photo, Crowe is dressed almost exactly the same as in the first. He's wearing a different wide-brimmed hat, and his beard has a different shape, but the black coat and long scarf hanging close to the ground are the same. The second photo is from 1973, and all we know about it is that it was taken after a concert at Ladbroke Grove. Crowe, however, has already begun to change. His face has gotten chubby-cheeked, and his belly hangs over the waistband of his Jim Morrison snakeskin pants. Despite everything, that second photo represents the height of Cooper Crowe's fame. The dozen or so hippies wandering around in the background of the image are a microcosm of the era. Feathers in their hats, frilled shirts, girls dressed as if for a Renaissance fair. The 12 apostles of the last acid supper. Over the course of the 1970s, Crowe published some 50-odd books, collaborated with rock bands, participated in festivals, wrote comics, painted murals, and did performances. He was to the Bohemia of London what Cesare Borgia was to the catacombs and secret passageways of the Holy See. The third photograph in my bedroom was completely different. The third photograph, which occupied the upper angle of the triangle, must have been from the late 80s. It's an actual photograph, a copy of a promotional photo from the Goddess London period that I found on my first trip to London when I was 12. In exchange for going with her, my mother took me to Scoob, a cave filled with secondhand books located on the border between Bloomsbury and Holborn. It was no community bookstore, obviously. Even still, you could easily lose yourself for a couple of hours in its rancid, pulp-smelling aisles. That photo had the prettiest frame of the three, with aged silver texturing, and I didn't put a mat on it because the photo already had a very wide white margin. It was dedicated to someone named Nathan, who I'm convinced was also the owner of the fanzine with the Crowe pyramid collage I found in the same bin. In the third photograph, Crowe is already a different person. He was always tall and stocky, but starting circa 1980, he could definitely be easily deemed thick or broad-bottomed. He's wearing a wool sweater over a collared shirt and a bow tie. He has a short beard and hair presumably combed back into a ponytail that isn't visible in the photo. He still has his mocking gaze, but because of his metamorphosis, it almost seems as if he's making fun of his own domestication. There's also something slightly disconcerting in that third photo. which is that he seems to be sitting at a table with a pen in his hand and signing something that's outside of the frame. So it looks like he's signing the very same signed photo he appears inside of. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I'm really excited. That was absolutely one of my favorite parts. It encompasses an entire life in just a few short sections. So all the melancholy and all the strength of a whole writer's life. So it's a really great section. I'm going to have to ask now for my first question about Cooper Crow, and specifically, there's a photo taken that one of those photos is from Goodbye to All Goodbyes, and it's a summary. So you have this wonderful summary of this science fiction novel, Goodbye to All Goodbyes. So it tells the story of the exonauts. And I'll summarize it really quickly, but basically all of humanity's problems have been solved in this novel, and they really can imagine and make anything. They can fly, they can change their appearance, and they travel through time and machines from the Victorian age. What really coalesced for me around the novel was when you write the grotesque version of rich people in our developed world. And so Cooper Crow for me was, even in that summary, was writing about sort of like the end of Western culture. And you traverse this writer's life throughout this entire novel in a very sophisticated way where you're not only looking at the philosophies of his book, but also who this person is through those times. So I wanted to know, can you talk a little bit about sort of the experience of not only inventing Cooper Crow, but how does that translate to your own reading life as a kid and your own reading life now? Was science fiction an integral part of your reading life, and particularly science fiction that is this sophisticated?
Well, I want to thank you before I start answering your very long question for your kind description of Silver Skin, but also for providing what I think is the only functional synopsis of the book that I've ever heard when you describe the plot of the book. Very early on, when I was talking to my publishers about this book, I found out that I couldn't tell what the book was about, because I still find it very hard to describe what goes on. I think probably I put too much in it, and as a result of that, I found myself, completely incapable of telling people what the story was, what the story was. So each time I used to say something different. Sometimes I said, I think it's about like a lot of teenagers doing tons of drugs, for example. Yeah. And some other times I said it's a young adult romantic comedy, So I just looked at the person that was in front of me, and I thought, I tried to figure out what would that person would dislike the most, and I chose that aspect of the book, because there's so many things in there that I was trapped by my own whatever ambition. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, thank you. I'll look at the recording and write down your synopsis, because it really worked. I was fascinated by it.
I can send it to you. For me, truly, it was like staring into a Caravaggio painting and all the discomfort and wonder, and I'll send it to you, but it really impacted me greatly.
Right. Well, and about Cooper Crow, I mean, I did not invent him, I just changed his name. He's a real person, so that fictional book that you mentioned, Goodbye to All Goodbyes, I can't remember exactly, because I changed all the titles of Michael Moorcock's books to but it does exist. The exonauts are the dancers at the end of time. So in some cases I just copied I just gave a true synopsis of what the book is about. In some other cases I made up some like very Michael Moorcock like sounding storylines, and hence the political aspect, the whole 1960s free your mind through drugs and science fiction part. And well, I mean, I don't know why I changed his name. That was a strange thing to do, because that's the only, I mean, if you see the three artists in the book that are like the three stages of the protagonist's initiation, I changed the names of the other two. You know, but I did change this one because I don't know, it kind of felt right because contrary to popular opinion, Michael Moorcock is still alive, like the book says, you know, and he's, I don't know, he's an old dude. I wrote to him a few times. I exchanged a few emails, and he was very, he gave me the impression that he was very uninterested in the world in general. And very uninterested in me. Wanted to like translate some of his books, you know, and he felt so detached, you know, that I thought, I don't know, I don't want to bother him in any way, you know. So I changed his name, and that gave me the chance to play a little bit around with you know, his real books, but also his fake books. And what he represented for me is, I mean, I did base the protagonist's relationship to Cooper Crow to the way I used to read compulsively when I was a kid, but mostly the way I read compulsively now. I actually did not know Michael Moorcock when I was a kid. I read him when I was in my, I mean, I had read a few books along my life, but when I actually started reading him seriously, I was in my 40s and I was living in Brooklyn. And I left Spain to go to Brooklyn, and I kind of like abandoned my fiction, my writing, which I used to write crime fiction. You know, my previous books are like I guess you can call them political crime novels. You know, and in Brooklyn, my life was very isolated. You know, compared to the social life that I had here. You know, I had friends, but mostly I thought that, you know, I was living inside my mind very much. You know, I started reading. I said one day, I think I'm going to read all of Michael Moorcock's fiction, and that was impossible because there's too many books. But I said, I swear, I solemnly swear that I'm not going to read anything else that's not Michael Moorcock. And for a year and a half, I only read Michael Moorcock's books. I tried to read all of his books, but I failed because there are too many, and I don't even own all of them. You know, but it was an experience of like, you know, becoming the ideal reader that a writer must have in mind, because a writer thinks of the reader. It doesn't think of his reader reading other books. It thinks of a reader reading only his books, you know. So I became I tried to become the ideal romantic embodiment of a writer's reader, you know, of what a reader should be, a person just faithful to one literary work, one literary author.
I love it, and I think in this way, Cooper Crow, the doppelganger that we have, he really serves as this. For me, served as this bipolar antithesis to the music. And I have questions about the music, but this young man, Paul, is flirting not only with ideologies and the science fiction of sort of like the end of empire, you know, the 60s and 1970s science fiction. They sort of saw very much what we're dealing with now, sort of the end of American empire, sort of what happens when you walk down this tunnel of imperialism. You even talk about the imperial phase. I have questions about that. And then he navigates that between a band. So I really wanted to connect these and talk about the music that's embedded here too, because you have Death in June, who, as described in this book and as described in the wider world, may or may not be fascist. And so you have this young 12 and then 14-year-old navigating these unknown ideologies just with this sense of breaking through to the other side, right? Breaking through and trying to contest with the fact that adults have socially constructed this reality that doesn't make sense for me, especially as someone who's pre-onset schizophrenic. Now, when I was a teen at punk shows, people did directly tell me, be careful of bands like Death in June who flirt ideologically or artistically or even sort of retroactively with Nazi regalia and sort of the t-shirts. So when I saw that you were going to dig in head first and write about this, my first thought was that's brave as fuck, right? Navigating what that means. And then two, sort of what is sort of the moral panic surrounding art? What is using Nazi regalia through art? And then what are the actual sort of political ideologies of the people that Pohl is navigating around with when he hangs out with this group of people in the novel who are sort of fascinated with Death in June? So we've talked literature and science fiction. I want to look at the dark side. I want to look at sort of the dark tendencies, because for me, Cooper Crow, although he's projecting sort of this end of empire, is doing it in a way that's pretty integral to how science fiction has worked in the Western world over the past 40 years. Can you talk about Death in June? Can you talk about music, the impact of that not only on Pohl, but in our lives and young people's lives? Let's get into the dirty.
This is not a question I know the answer of.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how to answer this. You know, I think that that maybe I chose Death in June for the book because I still remember very vividly the effect that Death in June can have in you when you're 14 or 15. You know, which is when I first got in touch with them, when I first heard their music, and I heard their music in a very similar context and situation, that the protagonist hears that song and thinks that that he's found something that is not really music. It has to be something else, you know. I believe that I mean, it's a generational thing. I'm almost 50, and I had my musical education in the late 80s, and in those days, dangerous music, at least in my social circle, was what we looked for. Not necessarily politically dangerous, but you know, self-destructive, dark, you know, as dangerous as it could be. You know, the more dangerous, the better. And that's the role of Death in June in the book. You know, it's like a beacon. It's like a black beacon that you can follow, you know. And I have this memory of doing that exactly, you know, even before I knew what neofolk was, and I knew what, you know, that musical movement had been linked with, you know, far right or conservative ideologies, or even, you know, like flirting with fascism. The music was already there. You know, the music was a beacon for me. One of the things that make me laugh about this book is how stupid it is that this book is set, like, you know, in present times. You know, like that's if that is trying to pass for a teenager of today, of 2020, you know, it's a complete failure. You know, the teenagers are not like that anymore. I mean, I was a little bit like that, my friends were a little bit like that, but you know, it's a complete failure of a book. Because I mean, I don't know if you talk to a teenager these days. I do not recommend it unless you want to go suicidal in 5 minutes, but they're not interested in that stuff at all, you know.
I taught high school dropouts for 10 years, so I could tell you
all right.
But I will say, I would almost disagree. I don't think it's a failure, because in any given group of teenagers, especially those I taught, there are always those, for better or worse, and I think it's built into the fabric of your book, nostalgia. A time before they knew. People are nostalgic for times before they knew. And so what pushed for me sort of the hyper metaphor even further is you have teenagers in Barcelona in present times who are not only flirting with sort of this authoritarian, you know, the dangerous music, but because it touches upon fascism. And what is fascism if not violent nostalgia? And so I don't think it's a failure. I'll have to, as a reader, I'll disagree. I think it was a perfect thing, perfect setup that you had. I thought it was brilliant in that sense.
I guess you could say, but this, I don't even know if this is true, but I'm just going to say it. Okay. I'm just like improvising here. I guess you could say that the protagonist of Silver Skin falls in love with Death in June, then finds out, thanks to his annoying sister, that they're Nazis. And then all he can do is rationalize that they're Nazis into his love for it. It's like, okay, they're Nazis, but I'm not going to think about that. I'm just going to focus on the fact that they're opening this like gates to a new world, so maybe this could be understood as an apology of the position that that Paul is trying to like act as if it's the art and not the person. I don't know, I'm making this up, but it could be understood as that, as that it's the work that's important and not the person. And maybe I don't know, maybe the final chapter of the Christmas Carol chapter kind of says that as well. I think that that Paul is a romantic in the sense that he believes in sacrificing the person for the art. He believes in self-immolation.
Which I love. Which for me, that's brought so many. Which is why I had mentioned previously that brought so much up as far as what does the end of Western culture look like? It's the self-immolation, the destruction of everything that came earlier. So I have to ask, because you fit just an extraordinary amount in few pages. It's 182 pages. You can read this in a sitting, in 2 sittings, and it is appropriately feels as it covers a few months and appropriately feels as you're reading it like those months during adolescence. But in that time you fit, it's ripe with philosophy, it's ripe with music, as we've discussed, poetry, lyrics, the summaries of the science fiction novels. So I'm always really fascinated with the idea of when writers in particular are fascinated with other art forms, what is it about, Javier, what is it about the novel itself? Why novels? Why did you become a novelist, and what do novels do for you over any of the other philosophies and musics that you talk about in your novel? What drew, like what can the novel do that these other things for you, maybe not that they can't do it, but that you did not become a philosopher per se? You as far as I know, you're not a musician. Maybe I'm wrong, but what is it about the novel for you?
I would say that I don't know. We don't really choose these things, do we? It's what we can like. It's what we can feel competent at. It's like I don't know. I wouldn't feel. I don't feel comfortable like writing philosophy, because I just I don't like holding like one truth that's not ironic. When you're writing a novel, you're presenting a truth that's ironic. There's a distance there, so that makes it much cooler, and all the literary genres are fine as well, but I like novels because even if it's not the case for this one, they can be as long as you want. I'm a lover of long fiction. I mean, the longer the better. It's just, if I can find like a 10-volume saga, I will feel it. I might not have the circumstances to do it, but I always feel attracted to it. The possibility of creating an entire universe is like, I mean, when I'm talking about a science fiction universe, any kind of universe, that's like pretty amazing. I tried writing music as well, but I'm a very, very late bloomer. I just, I started when I was in my 40s, and I'll never make up for all the lost time.
I think, well, we're happy to have you as a novelist and writer.
Yeah.
I'm very happy. Oh, go ahead.
It's probably the only relevant thing I've done in my life. So yeah, I couldn't be here as anything else.
Massively relevant. I mean, you even say, Paul says, so there's a part where Paul is talking about a critic, sort of a literary critic, and he says something, but literature is already the simplest way to explain itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I had a
Yeah.
no,
I love that. I love that.
I absolutely.
Yeah.
You find yourself, you know, in the United States, at least, we find ourselves sort of like surmounted in, like, you know, and I teach myself in writing classes, or you have young people in English classes. And when I was young, when I was in college, what confounded me was always the thing about the thing. You know, we're sitting in a room and we're not talking about the way it made us feel. We're removing the metaphors from sort of what makes us feel intimately like readers. It confounded me. So when I came across this, it pulled me right back into those classrooms as a college kid. And I wish I would have had this sentence to like put on a t-shirt or like hold up in a banner. Literature is already the simplest way to explain itself. And so I just thought it was brilliant because you're really, I think this novel itself, Silver Skin, is so embedded in what it feels like to be this age. And sort of the not only the conundrum of being young, but what that feels like. And for me, I think, you know, you had said there's a distance, there's a remove, and there's like an irony with a novel. But what you've done with this novel, and what I respond to so well in novels, is feelings beyond empathy. You know, kind of like I said, is what can a novel do? And for me, you know, I think for me, reading something like Silver Skin, it makes me feel like I haven't felt in a while. You know, and it does that in a good number of pages. So I also want to ask Mara. I do have a question. I love that this is a translation. Each novel. So even Paul. So Paul says this of like Crow's novel. Each novel is sort of like a personal mythology, a labyrinth, and even in a way a private language. Can you talk a little bit about what translating Silver Skin was like, and what work as a translator for you is like in general? Do you find yourself late at night or early in the morning trying to contest with someone else's private language? And what is that like?
Let's see. Well, there's definitely moments where a word or a solution will come to me that's been sort of percolating in the back of my mind. But translating this novel was quite simple for me, to inhabit this voice, as opposed to other kinds of books, you know, perhaps because of my proximity to the author. But it's a very close voice. So
yeah.
And you know, he's pretentious, so that always helps. It covers up when you're feeling too literal.
To the metaphor, to the philosophy of the thing. Oh, go ahead.
It's been really fun to have the book published and people and get people's reactions, because everybody seems to assimilate like the protagonist's opinions with my opinions, or my, you know, everybody seems to do the assimilation, the narrator author assimilation, and the protagonist of the book, you know, it's kind of embarrassing to be assimilated to him, because he's not very smart and he's like a pretentious kid, you know. And he says a lot of stupid shit all the time. So it's really funny to have people, you know, tell me what you know, talk to me about what I think based on what that kid thinks, you know.
You know, I love that you said that, because it's like an embarrassingly strange thing, and I'll just speak with what's happening in the United States, to have the reader-writer confusion, the writer and the book itself, the assimilation, the confusion of ideology, we don't do this with films to the same extent. Music potentially, and right now, you know, I was just speaking not that long ago with your publisher at Antibookclub about the moral panic in the United States of conflating art, and particularly novels, with sort of social media raptures and ruptures. and where people are piling on novelists to change pages and to change words and sentences in their books. And for me as a writer, and also as a teacher, and also someone who's Latin American, and sort of seeing the tones of what that means politically or ideologically, you know, I think it's a powerful thing, the moral panic that sort of is happening in the United States about that. I think it's a dangerous precedent, because I think the right learns from it and sets the tone and the rules. And so, you know, at one point, this is all even wonderfully addressed, where Bronwyn at one point even discusses how people and writers enter an imperial phase before collapse. And this is, of course, ideas that young people are obsessed with, right? Sort of these stages of life and these sort of like clear-cut stages of imperialism, right? And science fiction addresses that too. But she says it's the best phase, really. It's also kind of decadent. In the imperial phase, you've forgotten how you got there. Later, she says, you can also betray those values that brought you there. It's a glorious phase, and no, it can't be stopped. So thinking about these teenagers and this voice of sort of this imperial phase, you both have lived in Barcelona and New York City. So you've lived in Barcelona, which is ripe with the ruins of imperial phases, if we're to follow Bronwyn's logic, and then New York, right now, currently sort of like at the end of empire. Can you talk about navigating the two countries, the two cities, and what that was like? And you've touched upon it a little bit earlier, as just a citizen of those cities, and also as artists and translators.
Well, of course, my situation is the reverse of Xavi's, that I was born in Brooklyn and I've lived in Barcelona for an awfully long time. I was recently at a party and I was talking about something and I realized that it happened before my interlocutor was born. And I thought, God, I have lived here for a while. It's interesting what you were saying about this conflation between artists and their work. That's really problematic in the United States now, and I see it at some remove. So it's helpful for me, I think, to see how problematic it is. But yeah, this conflation is, I don't know, it's the end of art, perhaps. I think it was Faulkner that said it's like confusing the author with his next door neighbor. But this idea that any, not only the author's thoughts, but his character's thoughts are so, but it's like I have two different personalities, I feel sometimes.
Yeah.
My American personality and my Catalan personality.
And I like that comment you said, what Faulkner said, and I agree with you. Like, I'm a little confounded at what the root of it is, but the fact that you said it's the end of art, it becomes sort of trapped by ideology, trapped by sort of this reactionary ideology that happens in an instant. Surely every artist, writer, and musician in the back of their head today, if they have any involvement with online life, is a little scared, a little concerned. And I don't know to what sense that limits or it doesn't limit us. The thing that I really adore about Silver Skin is it's completely unconcerned with that. And it really commits to, Javier, like you said, it really commits to the teenagers' stupidity, right? and it commits to their pretentiousness, and it does it in a voice that we can recognize as true for these young people, but obviously,
I mean, at the same time, there is an obvious romanticization of adolescence, and of adolescent energy, which is the part of the book that I'm more interested in, that I'm most interested in. I mean, I think it's funny that there are two teenagers talking about the ages of man and the imperial phases, you know, when teenagers don't know much about life. So I think it's funny to make them talk about this and show in a way how they're moved by only grand statements and, you know, and this kind of like paraphernalia that they share, you know. So that's funny, but it's not their ideas, it's not their ideology that's important. I think it's their passion, and I think it's their energy, and it's a very ambivalent energy because it's like erotic and tenathic at the same time, you know. It's just adolescence, you know, it's confusion, and you know, it's like a little bit chaos, and I love that. I love that kind of representation, you know, and I love the idealization of this. Beyond that, I'm not really interested in like their ideology. I try to, I think I feel like in a way I've always, I see ideology a little bit as a function of neurosis, you know. You reach a particular ideology, you know, from your life circumstances, your childhood, your traumas, your birthplace, your, you know, and then you are a part of that ideology, but it's not you. You are the neurosis. You are the passion behind that ideology, you know. That's my answer.
I've heard it said that in terms of ideology and how that transforms to the state, and this is something that's so true with young people too, is you wear the skin of the state. You know, you wear the skin of the ideology, and when you're young, you're constantly changing skins, you're constantly changing clothes. You're fascinated to a degree on what part of the world you can claim as your own. You know, so they were I saw that very much, sort of the frenetic energy of youth. I saw it all the time, surely teaching dropouts who were sort of exiled from day-to-day life anyway, in sort of the frenzied way in which identity and skins and ideologies sort of like course through them at any given time. So that for sure was so pronounced and spot on. So I know you said don't drive yourself crazy by talking to teenagers, but I talk to them all the time. And this is exactly, you hit exactly sort of that frenetic energy that they have. So I mean, it's just so superb. I know we only unfortunately have an hour, so next time we will have to meet somewhere between the Atlantic and drink and talk more about books. I have so many more questions, but I know we always like to reserve any time for people in the audience if they have any questions. It's okay if you don't, and I believe you can type the questions into the chat, and I'd be happy to ask them for you. So just want to give people time if they have any questions to ask. If not, I always have lots of questions, but I want to make sure we have time for the audience as well.
I have a quick question.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi, Michael. Hi, Javier and Mara. So I am curious if you can talk a little bit more about the title and its implications and just how you came up with it.
Oh, I'm not sure I did. I'm not sure I did. When I wrote the book, it was called Browning. It was just a name of the name of the love object, the love interest of the protagonist, and I thought that was enough. You know, I thought that would be enough. But everybody hated it, so I started to try to think of alternative titles. And one was, what was it? Something about
The Book of Bronwyn.
The Book of Bronwyn, which is actually a book that the protagonist writes about Bronwyn before he writes his book about Bronwyn. And then I think I came with Silver Skin, or they came with Silver Skin, and I cannot remember. But at first I wanted to cry because my book was not called Silver Skin, you know, and it took me like a year to feel like Silver Skin was the title of the book. The worst part is I think I came out with it, but I can't remember, you know, and I don't know. Then I thought that Silver Skin has this like psychedelic Hawkwind, you know, connotations. At the same time, there's like a science fiction story within the story where there's a woman that has silver skin. But the silver skin is just like a metaphor for how the woman is fascinating, you know, so she shines in her life. You know, the protagonist always compares her to like stars and suns and stuff like that. You know, so I thought it kind of works, but I'm not even sure I came out with a title.
It works.
Thank you, Kevin.
And it fits in so much when you mention Bronwyn too, when Paul thinks of sort of this holy madness, right? This sort of like holy visions that he has, sort of the end of the artistic experience is holy. And I like, yeah, in Silver Skins surely shimmers. It sounds nice in English, which I think is for important people, for readers here. Thank you so much for the question. Cool. Anyone else have any questions?
I really like the cover image as well. I think it's pretty. It's beautiful, and it's like a Halloween cover.
Yeah, it's just absolutely stunning. And John Gall did the design, so it has that collage on it. It's a beautiful. And I love the back is black. I love I love sort of the revolt against.
Yeah.
Part of what Antibookclub does, the revolt against blurbs and things like that.
Mara showing the Spanish edition, which was made by a friend of mine. I think it's pretty as well.
Oh, nice. Oh, I like the illustration. Oh, cool. And what is it like? What is it like, real quickly, Javier? What is it like having, to any degree, a book on two continents? You know, what is it? Does the experience of having a book out in Spain, is it different than having a book out in the United States? Do you feel like anything happened between the Spanish version coming out and the way you thought about the book to when the English came out? Did you make any changes?
We didn't make any changes. No. I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine this book in America. I can't imagine anybody reading this book in America, just because it's a story that's so un-American, you know. So to me, it's very hard I feel like the taking the book out of its original context and putting it in a completely different context. To me, it's like, I don't know. I have no idea. You know.
Now, you know, my dad's family is from Ecuador, so I spent a lot of, you know, growing up going back and forth, but also in Chicago. And so for me, I'll say at least there was a strange familiarity with what it was like being that age in a city.
Yeah.
And sort of the dangers, and sort of not only just the dangers, but what opportunities for transformation that could happen almost.
Yeah, it's just, for example, like when I was writing the book, I was writing it based on the premise of what can be actually written and published in Spain.
Yeah. You
know, which is, I believe, probably much more than what can be written and said and published in America. So when after a while I was thinking of the book being published in America, I was thinking, is it okay what I wrote? I mean, can you actually say that in America? And I wasn't sure, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, it was too late because the book was already written. But I mean, I wasn't even sure. I mean, can you say that? Can you show that scene? Is anybody gonna get mad? You know, I don't know.
Yeah. I think
it's very strange.
It is, and I think it speaks a lot to what we were talking about earlier, sort of like the conflating the book and the person, right? This sort of literal puritanical sense that we have in this country. I think I couldn't imagine a better time and a better book right now in direct accidental response to sort of the moral panic we are having in arts right now. It's sort of a statement against the end of art, and what that can do for readers. So can it be? And it is in America, so we'll have to see. And Javier, if anyone gets mad, then you just tell me.
If anyone gets mad at all, if anyone gets mad at all, I'll consider it a personal success. You know, at least I made somebody get, you know, mad.
That's very much sort of like the underground. So it's a bit like in the United States, like if I'm pissing people off, especially in an empire, especially in a puritanical empire, hey, that's a good art day. That's a good thing. Yeah, I agree with that. And we only just have a few more minutes, and I want to make sure we have time for any other audience members. Any questions or comments at all?
I feel Mara has not spoken a lot, so maybe somebody should ask something to her.
I'm just the translator.
No,
Yeah,
never just. Never just.
Well, I was thinking about what you said, and I'm looking at the a blurb by Mariana Enriquez on this edition that says that this book is a story of dark adolescence and the account of an initiation. It's also a manifesto. Art is bothersome. It perturbs, it offends, says Calvo. There's no beauty without danger. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I going back to what you said about the translation. I translated a book by Xavi about 15 years ago almost. And that was a very interesting experience for me because I was so much earlier in my career. And I realized, it was the first time I realized that, you know, I could ask the author what they thought, but in the end, it was my book. The translation was mine. And so that was a very interesting realization. But then, of course, now we've come full circle, and our son was like reading the translation. I'm like, I don't like this. He was reading the proofs. So
it's like a whole other discussion what our children think of the work that we do. Like the alternate universe parent, right? You have the parent, and then you have the artist and the translator separately. But I can see the process by which in translating it becomes you. And for me, I read in Spanish up to a point. When things get a little bit too complicated, especially when it comes to poetry and novels, I have to pause. I grew up with Spanglish in the household, certainly. So verbally, it makes a lot more sense for me than on the page. But without works, you know, I know this is said all the time, Mara, but without works of translators, we would be devoid of the actual world. We would be devoid of thoughts. I think that speaks to sort of where we are in the United States and what we're devoid in, what we're devoid of. But I also think for me growing up in a bilingual household that only went to Ecuador once or twice every couple of years, to have books that were translated when I couldn't quite read the Spanish, for me it was, not to romanticize it, of course we're talking about children and romanticizing our adolescence, but it was truly a bridge to another place that felt better than being an American ever did for me. So whether we know it or not, I mean, translation as art is just so necessary. I know translators hear that all the time, but it's meaningful to biracial, bilingual kids who have no access to other countries as a kid. So thank you. And certainly thank you for this translation, which, yes, Javi, I hope makes people mad. And if they get mad, then like I said, I'm on your team, man.
All right.
We'll find the moralists
so
any way we
that's
can.
saying something. You talking about the translation and it giving access seems to have a correlation to an aspect of the novel that maybe you want to talk about, because we haven't, but it's super interesting. The poetic part, which is actually one of the more translating, more of the difficult parts for me to translate or speak about of the book, because I mostly work with prose and I'm just much more comfortable in that arena. But Paul has a discovery of Sirlot, who is a real poet, who I don't think has been translated much in English, but it's
sort of an amazing part of the book, I think. And he talks about Sirlot's kind of revelation in this movie theater of seeing Broadway on the screen, and how that kind of channeled the rest of his artistic output from then on. I don't know. Xavi, you want to talk about that?
About what?
About Sirlot and his role in the book?
Yeah, that's one of the parts that's more difficult to translate, probably, culturally, and also she had to actually translate the poems, which I mean, it's very, how would you describe it? It's very experimental poetry. It's esoteric in every possible sense of the word, and but it was another beacon for me to use. It was another thing that you can choose you can discover at a given point in your life, and bam, it just drives you insane, and you don't understand a word, and your experience is still of like not understanding, but it keeps pulling you. So it was for me, it was perfect for me for the third Ghost of Christmas. There's not much more to say about it, because it's very hard to describe his work, without actually
buy the book.
Exactly.
You'll get a taste.
All right. Talking too much again.
No.
I think the sense of, like, I imagine the absolute challenges of when you are sort of when there's no materiality, right? As a translator, I imagine, even just in talking to my dad, who loves absurdist jokes, as a kid, he would say them in Spanish, and I'd be like, I need the materiality of what that means in English. Like, I'm it's hilarious, but I'm trying to grapple with it. But I think the work there, especially when you have him not talk much as a ghost, at the end was I think just a really nice turn too. I know we're going a little bit over, Javier and Exile. So I
That's
think,
okay. You guys can go as long as you want, to be honest.
Oh, perfect. And I do want to leave, if anyone has any other questions. I want to say thank you for this book, Javier, Mara. Thank you for this translation. I feel very sort of honored to be one of the first in the United States to be able to read this beautiful book. And surely for those listening, and for those who will be listening, pick it up. It's a jolt, and it's something that I think we need on this side of the Atlantic. So thank you so much, and thank you to Exile for the invitation. Thank you to the publisher for being here. It was just, I couldn't think of a better way to spend lunch. And I know it's dinner hour for you, but I couldn't think of a better way to spend sort of a siesta lunch talking about books, which when I was a kid would have been the ideal. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for this. This was fantastic. And thanks everyone for spending your lunch with us. Javier, I have two questions, not questions, one question, one comment. How often do you get mistaken for the actor Peter Stormare? You know who he is?
Yeah. Sometimes, but
even
since,
your voice.
God gave me a peculiar physiognomy, so I've been compared to several character actors, all along my life. My wife used to had identified a moment in my life where she claimed I looked like Peter Sellers, for example. But it's been different actors.
Yeah.
as I grow older, it's it
Say
changes.
birdie num num. Say birdie num num. Well, this was 20 years ago. Look, no beard.
Well, Peter Sellers and Peter Stormare. I mean, those are two. I wish I could be compared to those two. And Michael, I do love the reverse, the back of the book. I didn't know that Antibookclub did that. It reminds me of, I just saw Spinal Tap. It reminds me of the Black Album from Spinal Tap.
Nice.
It couldn't, none more black. That's how much more black it is. So thank you, everyone. And once again, the link to purchase the book from from Antibookclub is in the chat. We will have copies, so please stop by, call us, email us. In a few, we'll take orders now. When we get the books, we'll give you a call. We're super excited about selling it here in the States. And thank you, Gabriel, for making this happen, and Michael for bringing this to us. And Javier and Mara, really, this was fantastic. And this is recorded. It'll be out on our YouTube channel and our website, and make sure you guys get a copy. But yeah, thanks everyone. This was great. And just stick around for you guys a little bit after. I just want to give you a quick tour of the store if you guys have a second.
Thank you, everyone.